Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, we don't often think of August as being one of our most active months for severe weather, but just looking over the last 10 days, I put a circle everywhere where we've had a report of severe thunderstorm activity, including hail, strong winds, and tornadoes. I want to confirm a couple of things we talked about last week. First of all, the official measurement on the size of that hailstone that moved through eastern Colorado, 4.83 inches, and yes, that is a new state record for the state of Colorado. But I also want to show you this one report out of Altus, Oklahoma, there in southwestern Oklahoma. They had on the 17th a cluster of thunderstorms that went through that produced a 93.5 mile an hour wind gust, which is just incredible to think about. Well, over the weekend, a lot of thunderstorm activity here in parts of the north central plains that then translated into the eastern part of the Corn Belt and then eventually into parts of the northeast. But just taking a step back and looking here at the nearly 2,000 reports of severe weather we've had over the last 10 days, well, this has not been a very typical August, to say the least. I want to show you one neat satellite animation here by taking you to the Pacific Northwest first. We've seen a very, very quiet year in terms of fire activity in the Northwest, but except just one incident that we've just saw here recently over the weekend in parts of the Blue Mountains. You can see right in through here a fire that broke out, and you can see the smoke pushing away from it. Just wanted to show you this kind of really neat satellite animation picking up on that smoke. Bigger picture in terms of drier weather, though, let's take a look at the latest drought monitor that was released last Thursday. A few areas that I am still very concerned about. Parts of the southeast. Even though we recently had some very heavy rainfall move through coastal Carolinas, there are still pockets of drought there that have had a hard time kind of working away on them throughout this growing season. In the south central part of the United States, earlier this month, over the last 45 days, we featured a broader ridge sitting here over the southwest, and that's really missed the rains in parts of western Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. In addition to that, the southwestern monsoon here has been late in arriving and very weak when it does in parts of Arizona. We talked about that last week. The drought still lingers despite some heavy rainfall recently in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, even getting into Kentucky and Ohio as well. North Central Plains, we're going to be watching the Canadian prairies getting down into North Dakota, and we didn't expect this drought to go anywhere in the Pacific Northwest given that it's the dry season. But maybe a better way to be looking at drought is to take a look at this map. This is looking at the top 3 feet of soil moisture availability. And when I look at this, what I'm trying to point out here is those regions where we're really struggling with deep soil moisture. We've seen a major drying out, of course, in this area. It's also in parts of Indiana and Ohio and Michigan. You can see here where our deficits are. Staying with the Corn Belt, look at parts of the north central plains here, especially in parts of North Dakota and northern Minnesota. Outside of that, you can see the patchy spaces down here in parts of the southeast, cotton and peanut belt, dealing with this as well. And then the drying out here in the western parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, and then much of Texas. In the western United States, this is actually quite normal, what you see over across the western United States in terms of soil moisture deficit, given that it is the dry season there. Where it is not dry, it has been exceptionally wet. Looking at just the weekend rainfall, if there's a place over the last month that has really taken a beating, I'd pick 2 places. I would say this part of eastern Kansas and then parts of Florida. Some places in Florida have been exceptionally wet, but that part over there in eastern Kansas, I'll show you some data from that in just a few moments because some of those folks are having their wettest year on record right now. We did have a weak tropical system move up the Carolina coast that did bring in some much needed rainfall to the Carolina coast, although quite heavy at times, causing some local flash flooding. But this is your last weekend's worth of precipitation here. Now look what happens when I stretch it out to the last week. We can clearly see the wettest corridors across the U.S. We can also see some folks that have really missed out a lot on some of the precipitation in the last week. Stretching it out even further, this is the last month. It is quite easy to pick up on who has been extremely wet, and I think your eyes are going to go right there to the middle part of the country to see some of those locations there. Let me take you to one spot in eastern Kansas. I'm going to go to Lawrence here. Lawrence, right now, you are having your wettest year on record, so we are right up here with our total accumulation, which is over 36 inches. And just to show you, normal is right down here, so we should be at about 26 inches. So we are showing a 10-inch surplus, and a lot of that coming really since the beginning of May, but some big rainfall events. One right in through here, another one here, and the most recent one right in there. So when we put it all together, this is our last 30 days in terms of percent of normal. And you can clearly see why the drought monitor has the regions it has showing up and continuing to stay in drought. Feel free to pause the video to take a closer look at your specific area right here. Now, moving forward, what are we looking at over the next 10 days? Excuse me, over the next week. I have the European on the left and the GFS on the right. In some regards, the models are in pretty good agreement, although amounts differ, but they're in pretty good agreement about what is happening right in through here over the next week or so. Where the differences come in, you're like, wait a minute, you just showed me that this area in the European model showing up the same as it does in the GFS. No, I'm not. That is next weekend's storm system. I'll show you that in a few minutes. The GFS is not got that one in there. It's got that same pattern going much further to the north over parts of Minnesota and parts of the eastern Dakotas here, whereas the European model has it here moving over Iowa. So there's a major discrepancy, but it's in next weekend's storm system. And I'm making an argument here that predictability right now is quite low given the mess of the flow we have in the Gulf of Alaska and over Alaska. I'll show you that in just a few moments. Other things I do notice, not much of recovery in the southwestern monsoon in either models. And if there's another place to look at the difference, it's over Texas, which I think most people in Texas would much rather have the GFS solution than the European. I'll show you the differences in a few moments here. Finally, we are going to continue to watch for a weak tropical pulse to move out of the Bay of Campeche, maybe there toward parts of the Gulf Coast once we get out here into the longer range forecast. But outside of that, because of this deep sagging front that will be moving through parts of the south and southeastern part of the United States, very wet over the next week and a half for that region. So that's kind of your snapshot over the next week's worth of rainfall. I honestly don't want to show you what I'm about to show you next because it shows you the discrepancy in the models. This is the last 4 runs from the GFS model looking at the accumulation of 1 inch of rainfall over the next 10 days. And even though we saw that this particular part of the north central plains and parts of the Great Lakes states had a decent chance at showing up on rain, see how much model variability there is? The darker the gray, the more confidence. Interestingly enough, remember the European wanting to paint this very, very wet? GFS isn't having anything to do with it. Both models agree that this area, though, is going to be wet, and I want to show you exactly why here. Given that uncertainty, to show you this is not really wise at this point. We have such weak flow in the atmosphere that to even use a 10-day forecast here, or even to look out at week 2, that's what we've got here. On the left, I have the European, and on the right, I have the GFS. Yeah, they both show some agreement, but I don't have much trust at all in a week 2 precipitation forecast right now, and I'm going to show you exactly why in a few moments here. This is the main reason. You're looking at the flow of the jet stream here in the day on Monday. And it's just a mess in the Gulf of Alaska over the Bering Sea. It's a mess off of the Aleutian Islands. And we have very weak zonal flow. That means flow that is west to east that's going right there along the U.S.-Canada border. So that means we're going to watch for storm systems along the Canadian prairies, getting up toward the Hudson Bay, and they will just drag and drape weak frontal boundaries that move through the eastern half of the country. So precipitation forecasting is forced on these boundaries. And because they're weak, their timing is difficult to predict, and therefore predictability is low. One thing I can say about this forecast or this flow pattern here, the heat will be on in the south central part of the United States under that ridge. And let's take a look next at what we're looking at in terms of our all hazards weather map. We have across the United States right now a large area of heat advisories, and right in through here this is excessive heat warning. We have the same thing over parts of the desert southwest with a red flag warning here in parts of Colorado and Wyoming. So you saw that broader ridge with the flow just dancing around up here, that broader ridge in this area, keeping things very hot from Kansas and Missouri to points south and east of there. All right. In terms of severe weather, we need to watch very carefully today the north central plains right up and through here. And why I'm so concerned about that is because as the thunderstorms erupt, not only here in parts of the high plains, but in the north central plains, it will be the thunderstorm cluster that emerges in this area that by the time we get into the day on Tuesday will have the potential to spread through Iowa, northern Missouri, and Illinois, and potentially into the mid-south with time. And that could be producing a large squall line, producing quite a bit of damaging winds. Then you notice on Wednesday, this area right into here really getting cleared out. And you can almost connect these two areas where we have marginal risk of severe weather. We will be watching middle and end of this week for a much drier and cooler air mass to move into this area, kind of clearing things out for us, okay? But let's keep our eye on that short-term severe weather threat This is our high-resolution NAM model. And getting us out through middle of the day on Monday, watching for showers and storms to continue to sit on the boundary through parts of Florida over toward Louisiana and New Orleans. But let's watch as we get into the afternoon and evening hours. Possibly some widely scattered showers and storms here in the eastern Corn Belt. But I'm going to watch this corridor right in through here, pulling up into the north central plains Monday evening. And the storm system I'm going to have to watch closely on radar shows up quite well by the time we get into the late overnight hours, early morning hours on Tuesday. It's this cluster of storms right in through here. So around Sioux Falls, I'll be watching your radar late in the overnight hours into the early morning hours on Tuesday, because those storms and their outflow will initiate, right now it's forecast to initiate a boundary on which storms will be moving through Iowa. Now, as these storms take shape over Iowa, we can see that the current NAM model wants to produce a pretty impressive squall line of thunderstorms that moves through Iowa, then through northern Missouri into western and northwestern Illinois. See it there? Now, I've only got you out to 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. And it suggests that that squall line of storms will spread from Chicago to St. Louis, all the way down into parts of central Missouri. Now, we're going to have to watch for the timing of these storms and the stability of the day as to whether or not they continue to produce damaging winds that move through eastern Illinois. But it does appear that the outflow from those storms will make it into parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, and the Ohio River Valley late in the day. So this will be the corridor we're going to watch later in the day on Tuesday. So it's all depending on how those storms blow up here in South Dakota late tonight as to how they progress through Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, and maybe even to parts of Michigan where we have been quite dry at times. So that's our short term, all right? Let's now take a look at the bigger driver for what's going on for the rest of our week's rainfall. It's this right here. This is Tuesday night. Look at the moisture. You're looking at a dew point temperature anomaly map. So there will be plenty of moisture to work with those storms until the major front comes through. This is now Wednesday evening into Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, evening, Friday morning. Look at the much drier air moving into parts of the Great Lakes states here. Meanwhile, the main moisture axis stretches right back up into the high plains and into the Dakotas. So we're going to watch for more storms to line right in through here, line that frontal boundary that's sitting with all the dry air sitting behind it. See it there? So this gets into our weekend, much drier weekend on tap for this part of the country, but all around it, see right in through here from parts of the southeast, getting through parts of Texas, Oklahoma, back up to the high plains. That's where I'm going to be watching for the showers and storms. Okay, so let's take a look at what this means by looking at our European model here. I'm going to stop it right here, and I want you just to step back with me. Ready? Here's the thunderstorms coming out tonight. They move right through parts of Iowa and then eventually over into Illinois, spreading into the Mid-South. Okay, so the European model not going to resolve these as well as the high-resolution NAM. It just can't because of the resolution. Now, Wednesday morning, you can start to see the influence of that drier air moving through Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. And on its southern periphery where the front is lined, that's where we're going to watch for showers and storms lingering on Wednesday morning. Keeping this moving, you see that throughout the day on Wednesday, getting afternoon and evening, the final boundary pushes a little bit farther to the south. We're going to keep watching right in through here for showers and storms. But the high pressure moves in Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and Thursday evening into the Great Lakes. And as it does so, it pushes our boundary again farther to the south. Now you remember the main moisture axis did this. And that's why as I continue to play forward, you're going to see that will be the area. See it there lining up so nicely? That we see more of these showers and storms right in through here while high pressure builds into this area. Okay? This is why there was such good model confidence at having more than an inch of rain accumulating over the southeast. This boundary as it moves through is the source of that. What's the other source? See this pulse of tropical moisture right in through here? It appears that it came out of the Bay of Campeche and then moves toward Louisiana, Texas coastline by the time we get to the end of this week and into the weekend. Now, the big uncertainty is right here. Starting off early next week or the end of this weekend, we need to see if the European model has properly picked up on this shortwave that sneaks out of the Rocky Mountains and potentially produces a low pressure center that moves through parts of Iowa and then eventually into the eastern Corn Belt. There's no point in me showing you this animation anything beyond this point, because to know if it's going to do that is of such great uncertainty right now that I don't have confidence to tell you. I'm just going to let you know all week long. I'll keep an eye on this to see how it progresses so that we understand our early next week rainfall. All right, in terms of temperatures, I want to make an important point about not only the stuff I want to talk about today, but my long-range forecast coming out on Wednesday. This is a map over here on the right-hand side that is taken from June 1st to August 16th, and we're looking at the height anomalies over that time period. We have had some high-latitude blocking over Greenland and over Alaska. And one of the consequences of this high latitude blocking has been the temperature patterns we've set up across North America. Now, I want to take you to Fairbanks, which is my graph that's up here in the upper left-hand corner. When you look at these particular maps, I want you to notice that the top color here represents highs, record highs. The bottom color represents record lows, and normally the temperatures fluctuate in here into this shading. Now, we've got data all the way up to mid-August, and each of the blue lines you see here is a separate high and low for any given day. In Fairbanks, we have not had temperatures outside of the range on the low side since back in March. Notice how we don't have any of our blue bars getting down here. That's what that ridge has done. Meanwhile, I now want to take you to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. In Sioux Falls, you can see that we have avoided sustained extreme heat. We had a couple of times where the temperatures got hot as we approached midsummer, but overall, we've seen more of our temperatures falling in the normal range, and at times down here, our lows getting outside of that lower range down into the cooler pattern. Now, why am I talking about this? Unless we break down this high latitude blocking, we're not going to be able to get into the rest of our growing season with any sort of, sustained above average temperatures. And we need it in this area. Here's our growing degree day anomaly map going back to the beginning of March. Where you see those blues, we are in deficit. And this is an area that needs heat to finish out a crop. So, to play for you the next 15 days of our trough ridge pattern, what do we see? We continue to see more of the same. Getting you all the way up to the beginning of September, ridges building in here, ridges building in here with a broader trough in this area. So it's no surprise that our temperature patterns do this over the next 5 days. With that front advancing, cooling things down. Yes, it'll be warm leading up to that front, but cooling things down, keeping it warm to the south of it and over toward the western United States. Look at days 5 through 10. At this point, when the ridge really begins to build out west, the heat comes on and stays on, while a cooler pattern emerges for the eastern half of the United States. And going out to the day 10 through 15 time period, we see the models are staying consistent with the heat in the western part of North America and some cooler temperatures sneaking through the Canadian prairies down all the way to the Gulf Coast. And yes, the GFS and the European model agree with this pattern all the way through the beginning of September. Now, don't look at this and start to fear early frost. This is not an early frost warning. This is just saying, we needed the heat and we're staying on the cooler side of things. I want to take you out beyond that. It's the September 3rd through September 10th. We don't see the model shaking that pattern anytime soon. So that's not good news. I'd rather show you that we keep above average temperatures as we progress forward, but models are picking up on this cooler pattern. Are the tropics doing anything? Well, no, not really. This is our SpaghettiOs plot here. We're looking for any time where all the models agree on the clustering of low pressure. And we do start to see that the west coast of Africa is waking up, and you even saw one little system sneak right up in through here. But not a whole lot coming out of the Caribbean, of course, this time of year, and the Gulf of Mexico staying relatively quiet. But I will be watching this little pulse of tropical moisture coming up out of the Bay of Campeche with time. To finish this up, I want to take you globally here. We're going to go over to Europe. We have a very complicated pattern in the North Atlantic right now, which means predictability is also low in the North Atlantic into much of Europe. We do see in the day 5 through 10 time period above average temperatures returning to much of Europe, but I wouldn't read too much into the precipitation patterns that you see over there on the left, given that we're watching a few very subtle features that are moving through parts of the North Atlantic, getting into the British Isles with time here. But these are at least your next 10 days on the left in terms of precipitation anomalies, and on the right, the day 5 through 10 pattern in terms of temperatures. So cool start, warm finish here in Europe. And finally, to take you over to India and China, the monsoon has caused some local flooding. I've seen some pretty incredible videos of some of the flooding through parts of India. We're still keeping the monsoonal moisture surging through, with over the next a week here seeing precipitation amounts ranging from anywhere from 2 to as much as 10 inches of rainfall. And in China, the southern grow regions have been dry after that major typhoon went through, and they're still showing up dry. North of the Korean Peninsula, though, very typical precipitation for this time of year. And what I want to finish on, and I hope you'll pause the video, and I certainly hope you've been watching this in HD, this is again just our year-on-year change of our Global Vegetation Health Index. Wherever you see the colors like you see here, this is where we've gone down in our Vegetative Health Index, and wherever you see, like we look over here in the western part of the United States, that is where we have an increase in our Vegetative Health Index. Pause the video. It just allows you to see here where we're seeing a difference year on year. But with that, I will go ahead and wrap up this forecast video. We Nutrien Ag Solutions thank you for your attention. Hope you look forward to all of our content coming out at my.nutrienagsolutions.com this week. Have a great week, and we will talk to you again soon. Thank you.